Chapter 11. Now, I grew up in a church tradition, and I youth pastored for several years in a church tradition that when young people were preparing to go away on a mission tour or they were preparing for something special, they had scripture memory assignments. And you had to memorize X number of verses. And there's one verse in today's scripture passage which you could almost guarantee was going to be on everybody's list of verses they've memorized. It's John chapter 11, verse 35. I heard some of you say it. You've got it memorized. What is it? Jesus wept. As I looked at this passage this morning, one of the things in preparation for this morning, one of the things that caught my attention is the raw emotion that is in this passage. Now, also growing up in the tradition I grew up in, I remember a little gospel tract, and it had a train on it. It had 3 cars on the train. It had the fuel car, the engine, and the caboose. And there were titles for these cars: faith, facts, and feelings. And the essence of that little tract was that spiritual life works best when faith is the engine, facts are the fuel, and your feelings get drug along behind it as a caboose. What that inadvertently accomplished across North America in evangelical churches was raising a couple of generations of Christians who didn't deal with the things in their soul. We didn't learn how to deal with emotion. And we've discovered that when Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, that if you didn't allow him to deal with the things that have shaped your emotions in life, it was almost impossible to be spiritually mature and remain emotionally immature. That God is a God who wants all of us, including the raw emotions. Now, I can say this in Pictou County, and probably a lot of you will understand. I was raised by a very staunch Presbyterian, Scottish grandmother. Well, I wasn't raised by her. All of her family were raised by her. And my dad got married, and we lived on the farm. And so her shadow. And she had one phrase for dealing with anything emotional. Let me see if I can get it right. Wish now. Wish now. You just, that's that emotional stuff. Wipe it aside. I don't know if any of you can identify with that. That sense that your emotions are something that you just keep down inside and don't deal with. But that's what made this passage so hard for me to think about preaching on, because I could preach on Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead and some good intellectual points out of that. But this week, God said, no, deal with the fact that Jesus has raw emotion in this scripture. So let me read it for you. John chapter 11, verses 30 to 44. Jesus stayed outside the village. Jesus has already had Martha come and talk to him. Lazarus has died. He's come 3 days late. Martha's already said you came 3 days late, and that conversation's already happened. And she's gone back to the village. Jesus stayed outside the village at the place where Martha had met him. When the people who were in the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave, so they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet, saying, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the others wailing with her, a deep anger welled up inside of him, and he was deeply troubled. Where have you put him? He asked. They told him, Come, Lord, and see. Then Jesus wept. The people who were there, who were standing nearby, said, "See how much he loved him." Because some said, "This man healed the blind. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying?" Jesus was still angry when he arrived at the tomb. A cave with a stone rolled across the entrance. "Roll the stone aside," Jesus told them. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, "Lord, he's been there 4 days. The smell will be terrible." Jesus responded, "Didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe?" So they rolled the stone aside. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, "Father, I thank you that you hear me, for you always hear me what I say. But I'm saying this out loud for the sake of those who are standing here, so they will believe that you sent me." Then Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out. His face wrapped in cloths. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him go." There's a whole lot going on here, just like there is anytime we're dealing with emotions that churn us up inside. In the particular scripture that I read, you may have been caught off guard by the fact that it said Jesus was angry. The New Living Translation uses the word anger. I did some research in it. The word there it's a troubled, it's a vexing, deep emotion. I don't know. Have you ever been really dealing with emotional stuff inside, and the look on your face has caused the person next to you to say, "Are you angry? Are you mad? Are you okay?" He was experiencing deep turmoil. There are things in the moment that were triggering this turmoil. For all of us, in times when we deal with deep emotion, there are things that are triggering our turmoil. For him, in this moment, Mary was weeping. Mary was someone who had made a very heart-to-heart connection with Jesus. She had sat at his feet. She'd actually got reamed out by her sister for sitting at his feet. She had a deep emotional connection with Jesus. And to see her coming weeping, to see people you love in turmoil and sadness, raises emotion within you. So part of what was happening in the moment was Jesus responding to Mary weeping. There was also the loss. His friend Lazarus, another person he loved, was laying in the ground. There's reasons why Jesus was being troubled in his emotions in the immediate moment. The third thing that bothered him in the moment was not the weeping, it was the wailers. Here in North America, we deal with death on a very sedate platform. But around the world, it's not always like that. This was an Eastern culture where there were those who were publicly employed for a small amount to come to the home of anyone who was grieving and wail. And I don't mean they shed a tear. I mean they wailed in grief. Culturally, it probably was something that allowed the family to feel free to let their emotions out because this public wailing was going on around them. But somehow the idea that all these people were there following Mary simply because they were paid to do so just churned Jesus up inside. Can you see the things that triggered his anger or his upset in the moment? Have you ever been in a moment like that? Where things just get you all churned up inside? You know, one thing we can learn is that it's not always just about the moment. Usually when our emotions get churned up, there's stuff from the past that is reflecting into that moment. And for Jesus, there were things from the past that reflected into that moment. He had just had a conversation with Martha, and he had just told Martha that Lazarus was going to raise from the dead. And Martha went back to the house where everybody was grieving, and what did she say? Well, all she said actually was she went to Mary privately and said, Jesus is looking for you out there. One of the things that would have created some frustration and some emotion for him is that he had told Mary that Lazarus would rise again, and she went back and didn't communicate the message to anyone. As a matter of fact, in the scripture we read, the only other thing that Mary says is, hey, don't do that, he stinks. Now, how many sisters have wanted to say that about their brothers? I only have one sister. Yeah, she probably has at some point. But Martha, and what happened with Martha, and that Martha didn't really get what he was promising, was part of what was behind these emotions. You take the clock back a little bit further, and when he decided to come to Jerusalem, Thomas, one of his followers, says, well, guys, let's go to Jerusalem and die with Jesus. I don't know if that was a vote of confidence or a sarcasm that really hurt. But I'm sure that Thomas's words would help churn what was going on inside. That even one of the 12 was missing the significance of what was happening. Go back a little bit further. Jesus had just come down from the Mount of Transfiguration not long before this. And on the Mount of Transfiguration, Jesus, in all of his God character, met with Moses and Elijah and talked about how things would end in Jerusalem. He had Peter, James, and John there with him to help understand that, and they slept through it, or they missed the point, and they didn't really understand. Jesus had been carrying for some time alone between he and his Father in heaven, and no earthly person he could talk to. He was carrying the weight of what was about to happen in Jerusalem. And now at this point where his capacity as the Son of God was going to be most obviously opened up, he was going to call Lazarus out of the grave after 4 days. He was going to prove once and for all on the outskirts of Jerusalem, in that town of Bethany, that he was the Son of God. But in his humanness, he also wrestled with what lay ahead. For us, we can take this lesson. When we're turned up with emotion, there's probably things in our past that are feeding that fire. And God understands that. And he wants to help us deal with things from the past so that they don't fuel the fire of the moment. But for Jesus, there were also things after that moment. Things that were coming, that he had the advantage that we don't have. He knew what was coming. You take a look in John chapter 11, verse 54. Verse 53 says, so from that time on, the Jewish leaders began to plot Jesus' death. As a result, Jesus stopped his public ministry. Part of the emotion of what was happening with Lazarus, as he knew this was the last moments of his public ministry. The 3 years he had committed to letting the world know that he was the Son of God were coming to an official end with the raising of Lazarus. You ever had something that you pour yourself into and then it comes to an end? Every end comes with, sometimes with great celebration as a graduation or those type of things. But it also comes with a little bit of grief because something is being left behind. Jesus was getting ready to leave behind the humanity that he absolutely loved and he had become part of. We read in chapter 12, as we go on, it talks about Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And as he crested the hill of Bethany and looked down into Jerusalem, Jesus once again burst out in raw emotion and he wept over Jerusalem. And perhaps the foreshadowing of that grief for the holy city of Jerusalem was in that moment. It was part of what lay ahead. What really was heavy on Jesus' heart at this time was what lay ahead. He was in the season that we now call Lent. He was in that month, a little over a month before Passover at this time. And during that last month, underlying everything Jesus did was the raw emotion of what was coming at the end. How do I know that? Take a look at John chapter 12, verse 27. This same word that was translated anger in chapter 11 is translated deeply troubled in chapter 12, verse 27. Jesus is speaking. He says, "Now my soul is deeply troubled. Should I pray, Father, save me from this hour? But this is the very reason that I came. Father, bring glory to your name." Then a voice spoke from heaven, saying, "I have already brought glory to my name, and I will do so again." The crowd heard the voice. Some thought it was thunder. Others declared an angel had spoken to him. We're going to, over the next month, take some time and look at John chapter 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. We're going to prepare for Easter by taking a look at Jesus' last night. His last conversations with his followers. I would love to be able to, in 2 minutes, wrap this sermon up and say, here's how you deal with all this deep emotion stuff, and here's the simple pill that fixes it all. And it makes it go away. But it's much more valuable than a 2-second pill. Over the next month, we get to look at Jesus as he lives with this emotion of the end coming. Between the time he said, "I'm deeply troubled, what should I pray for?" and God spoke from heaven and said, "It's going to be okay." Between there and the time that he cries in the garden and says, "If possible, let this cup pass from me." In the intervening time, Jesus goes into an evening when he celebrates Passover with his closest followers and where he teaches them the deepest things about life. Included in that are some of the deep secrets to being able to allow God to heal past hurts. To allow God to give us the capacity to be honest about our emotions in the moment without being overwhelmed by our emotions in the moment. And to allow God to touch us so that we look ahead to the future without being ruled by the fears and the frustrations that our emotions bring. Are you interested in that walk with Jesus? No, maybe you're like my grandmother. You got the emotions all under control and you can just take them all aside and go, "Wish now." But for me, today, looking at this miracle of Jesus that ends his public ministry, I've been overwhelmed by the raw emotion and how Jesus handled it. And I want to take you there to learn the deepest things that he teaches about the Christian life over the next month. John 13, 14, 15, 16, and his prayer in 17. And so that we understand how to live the way Jesus lived. How to deal with life with the power of his kingdom. How to be both spiritually and emotionally mature. I invite you to come with me and enjoy the journey. Let's pray together.